Hey there, Ron Sullivan, your online hitting consultant. Wanted to give a quick demonstration of ground force. Talk a little bit about how youth players use their lower half and why this is a great idea to start exploring with players. And I say that because I don't think that you should run off and get a 6-pound ball for your 8-year-old to do this drill. I think that the main thing that I wanted to demonstrate today, because I think it's really clear, you don't have to be a hitting instructor or even a player, I don't think, to understand how this would feel. If you have 6 pounds in your hand, right, and you drop into your weight shift and you're challenged once the heel gets in the ground to stay back, right, I think everybody watching gets an instant idea of what ground force is. And ground force is getting some press these days where Miguel Cabrera's on Sports Science and they're talking about the pounds of pressure into his front side. I've been talking about finding a leverage point with my players now for a while, in that I'm trying to get them to find their weight somewhere in this point when they get to their weight shift. I don't care if they're a no strider, if they're a big strider, little strider. I'm trying to get them to find a leverage point in the ground that they can drive from. And ultimately what most youth players do, because we become so lower half conscious, or we become kinetic chain conscious, that the lower half starts the upper half and so forth. Typically when people are talking about the lower half, what they're talking about is, or at least how it's translated, always goes to the hips, right? We start talking to kids about firing the hips. And is that a bad thing in itself? No, it's not a bad thing. But when a player doesn't understand how to use the ground in order to help the hips drive, it's, I think, a pretty bad thing. In that they're spinning their hips on top of the ground. And the biggest force that we can use is gravity, right? And that's really what ground force is all about. Now, this is an exaggeration. I don't think that most players are going to feel this much of a load when they drop in, because they're not using 6-pound ball. But I like to explore things like this by not hitting things with a velvet hammer, but using ways to really pound home the idea, in that ground force is what ultimately helps us unload the swing. Okay, so if you see my front side here, as I drop into heel plant, right, everything is going to respond to that ground force, right? That's what's helping me unload more efficiently. That's what's helping my hips, so to speak, drive, right? And so while my leg mechanics, for all you perfectionists that have certain angles that are absolutes in every single swing that you see, they're not going to be perfect in this drill, because the goal of the drill is not let's learn what perfect mechanics look like, or let's learn how to make our legs look exactly like Albert Pujols on every swing. The goal here is to demonstrate how to teach our players how to be athletic. Now, some of those things, as far as leg angles go and all that stuff, it's a great, those are great things to fine tune your 13, 14-year-old that maybe is not using the ground perfectly, or he's using the ground perfectly, but he tends to get the front or the back leg a little too straight, which kind of pulls him a little bit too much up on top. Maybe his spine angle gets a little forward. I don't know. I mean, the fine-tuning stuff is, I think, after a player understands how to use the ground, right? But if you're just constantly searching for a leg angle, man, you're going to get it. Somehow you're going to teach the player to find a back leg angle. But if they're not using the ground to do it, who cares? You can, and that's my whole point. Let's don't become too mechanical with our younger players. Let's teach them just to make more of an athletic move, right? And then later on, if they're having still some issues with certain things, then you can start going, okay, well, maybe when you're getting to the ground, you need to drive your hips a little bit more. Or maybe when you're getting to the ground, you need to release your back leg a little bit better. Now, you see, I'm 42 years old going on 43. I'm not very flexible these days, okay? But the reality is that this move is not intended to be perfection, right? But it's to pound home the idea, right, that it's really important that we use the ground to help create explosiveness, to help our swing be more efficient, that we're going to use the ground to help unload. I'm not saying that it's all the ground here that's helping my hands move forward. It's not the ground here that's ultimately driving all of the rotational forces or whatever you want to call it. But if you use a certain percentage of that, it's going to help everything be more efficient. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and go to split screen here for one of my weird face drills. I don't know why I make this face, but there's a reason why they call me Carl from Sling Blade. Right, but you can see here as I'm doing something here. I love it's like a litmus test for me with players. Now I know you don't want players to have their feet together like this, but I like to challenge players just to see what they're going to do naturally with the ground whenever you put their feet together. Now I'm going to tell you what most kids will do is, well, number one, they're like, this feels weird, right? And it does, and so that you tell them to get over it. And what's going to happen is they start spinning around. They'll spin their lower half here, right, to start getting their body some, I guess, some ability to whip the barrel around. Typically what will happen is their entire backside will spin or rotate around the ball. And what I'm looking for, and you usually see it with players that play at a high level, what I'm looking for is, did they make an athletic move to get more aggressive before, or more athletic before they took off? You can see here it's kind of a Goldschmidt load down, right, from the top as I load down into the ground, and watch my legs get more flexion as I'm going to grab the ground, right, and then ultimately unload the swing. And then most importantly, did the player get a leveraged front side, right? I don't care about leg angles and all that garbage. Did they use the ground really well, right, to unload the swing? Right? And so if I just was completely dependent, especially at 42 years old, to throw this wooden bat around, I would be in big trouble. But I know that I have to use the ground in order to, for lack of a better word, kind of help my athleticism, right? So, you can try stuff like this with your player just to see. It's a great way to just see how are they using the ground. If you see them just spin around, and particularly if you see them fall over, then you probably have some work to do with the player understanding how to use the ground. And you notice how I got here in this kind of a tall finish. And I know we're not trying to teach all players to do that, but with your feet together, if you're hitting the ball and then falling backwards or falling over or falling back towards the plate, you got some work to do. And so I like to use stuff like this as a litmus test to say, hey, is the player using the ground to help with balance, number one? Number two, are they using it for force? And so I think that's a great way to, I don't know, just give me an idea of what they're doing. So are my hips, even with my feet together here, are my hips turning? Well, sure they're turning, because I'm using the ground to turn them. I promise you I'm not saying, okay, I'm at this point now, I'm going to fire my hips. No, I'm using the ground in order to drive those things. All right, so hey, look, that's just really just a way to just kind of pound home the idea of ground force and so forth. And so, feel free to send me video of your players or you doing the drill as a coach or an instructor that's trying to better understand what ground force is. And I'd be happy to take a look at it and send you back any comments that I have to help you better with that idea. But otherwise, I really appreciate you watching. And again, if you have any comments, please leave them below. I'd love if you have likes. Please give the thumbs up. Or if you're not a subscriber, I would love to have you around. So when I release things like this in the future, you get the video. All right. See you guys.